Got it. Now, I would like to say that with this measure, we are now adopting, to my mind, it will not be possible to have this system or any other system functioning effectively. The number of clauses that we have included are so restrictive and rigid that it will not be possible for any system to function in this country. If at all it is able to function, it will be able to function with a lot of difficulties. It will be said afterwards that the industrial sector, particularly the private sector, has not been able to deliver the goods. I would like to warn the government that if anything happens in the future in which industrial production or production in the private sector has not gone up, it would be not because of any lack of efforts on the part of the private sector, but because of the measure that we are now adopting. I have mentioned several times how this particular bill is very restrictive and how it will hamper the normal growth of companies in this country. It is a pity that when we are on the threshold of the 10th five-year plan, such a measure should be passed in this house. I would now like to make a few observations about the speeches of some of the honorable members here. Sri Asoka Mehta justifies the restrictions on managing agents by saying that managing agents are no longer the main source of finance. He also argues that profits have been high and will continue to remain high, and therefore he would like to see the managing agents being paid on a sliding scale. He is in the habit of referring to a number of books and making quotations from a number of them published in America or in other countries, and particularly by some of the professors. I would also like to mention to him that even when companies are floated, it requires a certain amount of confidence amongst the investing public, and it is because a particular firm is managing a particular company that this confidence is created in the investing public. Even there, as the Honorable Finance Minister has said, there is a short of overall tight control. New banks and insurance companies are not floated nowadays. What you have are the few banks which are existing and the few insurance companies that are existing. The other point is that the credit worthiness of the managing agency firm does count to a certain extent in getting credit from the banks and other financial institutions. Yesterday, it was mentioned by my honorable friend that the crux of the problem is the question of payment of remuneration to a particular managing agency system. He said that in this bill, a definite encouragement has been given to the alternative type of management, namely the managing director or the manager, where an individual has been permitted to take 5%, while in the case of the managing agency, it has been permitted to take about 10%. I would like to point out to him that it is not merely the question of remuneration which will decide the alternative type of management. The remuneration is not a very important thing unless and until you allow a certain amount of flexibility for any system to function. It will not be possible to evolve any other system to take the place of the managing agency system. In spite of so many shackles, you may find that those few business houses which are carrying on now may have to carry on the present basis. You may not find many new people coming in the field. Several times it has been mentioned in this house why the business community has not prescribed for itself a code of conduct. In this connection, I would like to point out that a degree or diploma is essential for the profession, and in case of violation of the code, sanction should be provided by it to prevent a person from practicing the profession. Today, even Ashoka Mehta and Sri C.C. Saha can set up a grocery shop and become businessmen. Nobody lays down any condition for starting business, and nobody can prevent others from continuing it. But I would like to point out that with regard to the code of conduct, there is a certain amount of ethics and there are certain standards and traditions on which business houses function. If a particular firm has not got proper ways of managing its business, you will find that that business house will find it difficult to function, and it would be difficult for it to command the confidence of the business community. It would not be possible for it to function as effectively as a firm which has proper ways of managing its business. That is sufficient as a code of conduct. It is not possible to prescribe a certain code of conduct in the manner it has been done for the profession in general. In conclusion, I would like to say a word in regard to employment with which I have been dealing so far. According to the figures supplied, the number of displaced persons from Bangladesh employed through employment exchanges is only 37,000. This is very meager compared with their total number, which comes to 32 lakhs according to the official figures. This is with regard to Bangladesh refugees. The number of displaced persons from Pakistan employed through employment exchanges is not very increasing, but still it is 75,000. I would urge upon the Honorable Minister to take this into consideration and see that something is done to find employment for these people. Of course, there is some expenditure incurred on general education and vocational training, but when we look at the number of persons who have been given vocational training, we find that the number already trained and under training is only 17,000. This figure also seems to be very small considering the magnitude of the problem before us. Some programs of general improvement have been undertaken by the government of West Bengal by way of setting up new industries, etc. These programs should be looked into and put into operation with a view to giving more employment to these displaced persons. ये 1000 प्लस वर्ड डिक्टेट किए गए, 1000 प्लस और 100 की स्पीड है। ये आपको सेट नंबर SSC C D ग्रेड टेस्ट 92 के नाम से मिल जाएगा। 100 मैं नेक्स्ट एक्टिविटी डिक्टेट कर देता हूँ। Ready? Started. It is unfortunate that the appeal made by Honorable the Home Minister that this bill should be discussed in a practical manner, taking into consideration the realities that we are facing, the complicated nature of the problem that we are facing has been ignored. There have been attempts on the part of some of the speakers who spoke on this bill to take up a partisan attitude, an attitude based more on some of the principles that were held dear by them rather than in terms of the realities before us. There is no use ignoring the fact that the desire of our constitution makers was that within 15 years since 26 January 1950, when the Constitution came into force, India would be in a position to solve the problem of official language in the various parts of the country. The various points of view that were expressed then in Parliament would be taken into account by the government and by the people, and serious attempts would be made to see that some solution could be found. The bill that is before us is really an admission of our failure to solve the problem of official language. It is true that this bill does give a new life to English as the official language, and that too for an indefinite period. Why had we to do this when there was a general desire on the part of the Constitution makers that on the 26th January 1965, Hindi shall be the official language? It was the wish of the Constitution makers that on the 26th January 1965, Hindi should be the official language, and that wish of the Constitution makers has not been fulfilled because of the fact that we are not able to make full use of the 15 years that were available to us in order to find out an acceptable solution to the problem of the official language. During these last 15 years, there has been a rapid progress of the regional languages, including Hindi, but Hindi has also developed more as a regional language than a language which has spread throughout the length and breadth of the country and which has been made more acceptable during that period. We have to find out the reasons why it was not possible within the last 15 years to make Hindi a language acceptable to all parts of the country. Where exactly have we failed? What exactly are the reasons which have been responsible for the failure on the part both of the government and the people? This question is not something which was ignored by the country. Time and again, this question had come up for active consideration at the highest level. Commissions were appointed to go into the problem. A parliamentary committee was appointed to go into this problem, and in the innumerable discussions, seminars, meetings and discussions, this question had come before the country. The various political parties had offered their own solutions and had advocated certain steps which ought to be taken in order to see that language became a commenting force rather than a dividing force in our country. My own party has on more than one occasion made some concrete suggestions in this matter. It was suggested that there ought to be language institutes in all the principal cities of India, wherein the various languages in the country could be studied and attempts might be made to find out how the form and shape of Hindi could be changed so that it became an acceptable language throughout the country. It was also suggested that there ought to be continuous exchange of students from one part of the country to another, especially with a view to finding out how the language problem could be solved by actual trial and error. It was suggested by us long ago that in the various universities in the country, more than one Indian language should be taught so that again a cementing force could be built up and ultimately we may be in a position to find out how Hindi could be made a language acceptable throughout the length and breadth of the country. In spite of these various suggestions, in spite of these various discussions, unfortunately, neither the government nor the people of this country have succeeded in finding out a solution of this very thorny problem. As long as we have not been able to find out a solution of this problem, it would be unwise to impose any language or an official language throughout the length and breadth of the country. It is not just a question of political arithmetic, that there are other considerations involved. The 42% of Hindi speaking people are living in compact and composite areas, while Hindi is not well known by the rest. If Hindi is suddenly made the sole official language, there would be certain difficulties regarding the transaction of official business. 840 वर्डों के साथ डिक्टेट किया गया है, 80 की स्पीड है, फ्लेक्सेशन ना के बराबर है, और SSC C D टेस्ट नंबर 92@80 के नाम से आपको मिल जाएगा. ठीक है. हाँ, ये फाइल तो विद कोमा के साथ ही होगी. अगर आपको नो कोमा वाली फाइल में टाइप करना है तो मैं आपको इसका नंबर बता देता हूँ, आप उसमें टाइप करेंगे. इसका नंबर है 467.